Welcome to Alpine Daily. It's Tuesday, and we've come today to Hebrews chapter 7, one chapter of Hebrews each week. And what I want to show you today is the idea of how incomparable Jesus is compared to anyone else. Now, the theme in the book of Hebrews is the greatness of Jesus. The Hebrews are people who are tempted to go back to Judaism and reject Jesus for the Old Covenant, the Old Testament ways. And so the writer of Hebrews is trying to establish for them that Jesus is greater than angels. He's greater than Moses, chapter 3. He's greater than the Sabbath. And now he's establishing that Jesus is greater than the Old Testament priesthood. And we read that in chapter 7, starting in verse 23. Now there have been many of those priests, speaking of the old priests of the Old Covenant and the Old Testament, since death prevented them from continuing in office, but because Jesus lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. Such a high priest truly meets our need, one who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens. Unlike the other high priests, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people, but he sacrificed for their sins once for all when he offered himself. Now, what we're going to see here is that Jesus is far superior to any of those high priests that ever lived in the Old Testament times. Far superior. And there's three reasons why. One is because Jesus is eternal. It says here that he lives forever, and because of that, his priesthood is permanent compared to those old priests who only lived for a few years and then died. Secondly, he's superior because he is sinless. He is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners. He says it in a whole bunch of different ways, and the implication of that is that he doesn't need to offer sacrifices for his own sins like the Old Testament priests did, because he doesn't have any sins to sacrifice for. And then the third reason that Jesus is superior is because he's both the priest and the sacrifice. It says in verse 27, he sacrificed for their sins once for all when he offered himself. And so being the priest and the sacrifice at the same time. And the implication of that is it says he is completely able to save. It says, see up here, that such a high priest truly meets our needs. There's nothing lacking in Jesus whatsoever to be able to save us. And then likewise, he's also able to save completely. We see that in verse 25. And so those are not exactly the same things. Jesus is completely qualified to save us in every possible way, and because of his qualifications, he's able to save us completely without anything else needed to be added to our salvation. So this is amazing. This is a wonderful thing to consider, thinking about Jesus as our high priest, as our Savior, why he's so far superior to any high priest of the Old Covenant, why we trust him completely for our salvation. And I want you to think about that today and reflect on Jesus, and maybe just spend some time praising him for these attributes that were spelled out in these verses, the things that were mentioned about him: holy, blameless, eternal, all the rest. And I encourage you to pray by name for people who need to know this Jesus, who need to know this high priest and the salvation that he provides. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.